The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through it. A man was there named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich. He was trying to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd he could not, because he was short in stature. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore tree to see Jesus, because he was going to pass that way. When Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today." So Zacchaeus hurried down and was happy to welcome Jesus. All who saw it began to grumble and said, "He has gone to be the guest of one who is a sinner." Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, "Look, half of my possessions, Lord, I will give to the poor, and if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I will pay back 4 times as much." Then Jesus said of him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because Zacchaeus too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek out and to save the lost." This is the gospel of the Lord. I know that everyone was in great anticipation and excitement to find out when the next message series was going to happen. Well, it happened last weekend at St. Joseph's and St. Ursula's, and it's the sequel, the Game Plan Part 2. So again, those of you who may have missed last weekend's homily, you can go to the Family of Parishes website. There's the link that takes you to Part 2. You go to Part 2, there's a button that takes you to Part 1. I know it's very confusing, but it's very easy. If you just follow the links, you can see the entire Part 1 message series, or you can see the first homily of this message series, which is the continuation of a reflection of our kind of new pastoral vision and pastoral plan in this post kind of pandemic world. A couple of weeks ago, I got my tires changed. Tires got worn down from traveling all over the 5 churches here in Chatham and driving back to see my mom every Sunday afternoon till Monday, and driving all over, and it's been a while since the tires were changed. I got my oil changed the last few months. They kept saying, "You got to change your tires." I said, "I'm going to try to get to winter time." So we're getting close to winter, and so I went and got a new set of tires because we need the traction, we need the control. It's a really smooth ride when you have new tires on, and so that's it helps. It's kind of the most important component of the vehicle, because that's where the rubber hits the road. That's what keeps us on the pathway. And I was thinking about that, and this kind of second part of the message series, it continues from Part 1, where we looked at the 2 pillars of being faithful disciples. So we're called to form disciples who reach out to all. And I kind of talked about these 6 qualities of a faithful disciple. That's going to help shape the ministries and programs as we move forward. But I've had a few people ask me, saying, "Well, what's going to happen? Like, when does it start? When does the change and transformation start?" Well, it happens now. As the rubber meets the road, over the next 4 to 5 years, we're kind of layering or implementing, kind of in stages, because we can't do it all at once, to kind of slowly go through a progression where we gain some traction. Get it? Traction, tires. It's a tough crowd. Saturday is always a tough crowd. But I got a thumbs up here at the front. Okay, so I try. So we're going to kind of put 4 wheels on our vehicle along this highway to heaven as we move forward, fulfilling God's mission for us. In the first homily, I talked about the first tire, or the first wheel, which we're kind of entering into now, which is this whole sense of focus on welcome and family. This involves reconnecting and building relationships with one another. Again, the pandemic certainly disrupted our ability to connect, and we know that we need to reconnect with one another, get reacquainted with one another, and we got to rebuild those bonds through various ways. A lot of it through social opportunities for us to reconnect with one another, understand that we're family. Offering hospitality and welcome. We're transitioning even at Masses slowly over the next year of how we're going to offer great hospitality, great welcome at our events, making sure we have, coffee, tea, juice, amazing cookies. It's awesome. But this sense of being appreciated, being loved, knowing one another, which is a challenge in our family parishes of 5 churches, but slowly over time, we can get to know many different people. And so this sense of offering this hospitality and welcome. Community events, like our family movie nights, like our Halloween family event tomorrow afternoon from 1:30 to 3:30 at the Spirit and Life Center. Have a wonderful event there. We have our faith film series. We have our Good Place Cafe after the 9:30 Mass Thursday mornings at St. Ursula's. We have, parish breakfasts that are happening. All of these different ways and more to come to get us reconnected. Of course, accessibility, I talked about in the sense of making sure that we do some events during the weekend and weekday afternoons, doing some events online so people who might not, especially in the winter, be able to get to some of the events, or who are homebound, that connect and stay connected with us through live stream and the website, that we reach out to people as much as possible, and then make extra efforts to our access points, which are our sacramental families, our Catholic schools, to really build those bonds. Because when we get to know one another, we support and care for each other. And so this is a perfect time after the separation of the pandemic to move that forward. How to sum up that kind of feeling? Did you know that Cheers debuted at the end of September 30th, 1982, 40 years ago? That was a great show. And if you take a look at some of the lyrics of the song, and you'll be tempted to sing this, but please don't. Because making your way in the world today takes everything you've got. Taking a break from all your worries sure would help a lot. Wouldn't you like to get away? Sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name and they're always glad you came. You want to be where you can see our troubles are all the same. You want to be where everybody knows your name. It's kind of the sense of our family parishes that I would like to build, that people know one another. I'm just waiting for Norm to walk through the front doors of the church. And everyone turns and says, Norm. But that we get to know one another, and when we gather, we trust one another to support each other on this journey of faith, and that we invite others always to come and journey. So now we come to this second homily of the series, which focuses on this very beautiful gospel story of Jesus and Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus is short. There's a big crowd trying to see Jesus. He's getting popular. He's performing miracles. And he's trying to figure out, how do I get to see Jesus? I want to know more about him. He climbs a tree. He does everything he can so that he can see him, so that he could encounter him. Of course, we're just hearing the gospel. Jesus notices him. What Zacchaeus really did is kind of pulled away all the obstacles, worked around all the different things that would block him from seeing Jesus, and scaled up the tree so that he could meet him. And we too have to do that in our lives, is take away all those distractions that take us away from being able to see the Lord, and get to an angle and get to a spot spiritually in our lives and in our schedules to be able to see Jesus. Because when we encounter him, our lives are transformed. Because Zacchaeus goes through a conversion. When Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today. Jesus, looking around, sees Zacchaeus and says, I'm going to stay with you today. Zacchaeus put himself into a position to be noticed by Jesus. And Zacchaeus would never have thought that Jesus would come to his house, but it's really Zacchaeus opening up his heart to allow Jesus in. Because Jesus desires for all of us to welcome him into our hearts. He will not force himself into our lives. We have to look for him as he looks for us. We have to pull aside the obstacles that can block us from seeing him, and then we welcome him, we invite him. But when we do that, our lives are changed. Look, half of my possessions, Lord, I will give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone anything, I will pay back 4 times as much. Zacchaeus, being a tax collector, they weren't the most honest people. Tax collectors collected for Caesar. They also took some for themselves because they had power. Jesus, recognizing Zacchaeus as this tax collector, needing love and mercy, although people in the crowd saying, why is he going to hang around a sinner? He's a tax collector. No one liked the tax collectors. And yet Jesus goes and sees him and encounters him. And in that encounter, Zacchaeus' life is transformed. He's set on the path. Jesus says, today salvation has come to this house, because Zacchaeus too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek out and to save the lost. Those last lines are familiar because our 2 pillars for our pastoral vision, our transformation over the next number of years, is to form disciples who reach out to all, fulfilling Christ's mission. Because we can look at this beautiful story of Zacchaeus and Jesus in 2 ways. Certainly the one way of us being Zacchaeus, taking away the obstacles, climbing the tree and trying to see Jesus and being overwhelmed by his love by welcoming him into our hearts. That creates a conversion. But we can also view this beautiful story that we are Christ. That we recognize those who are desperately seeking God's love, God's mercy, God's grace, God's forgiveness, even to be noticed and acknowledged. And so we are also called to be Jesus, to seek out those in our world today, those in our family of parishes, those in our own families who are kind of on the sidelines, who are ignored, who are forgotten, who are lost, or who just want someone to speak to them, to acknowledge them, to love them. And that is what our mission as parish communities, being baptized and confirmed, are called to try to do each and every day. That's the mission for our family of parishes. And so, kind of the second wheel in our kind of transformation as a faith community, I'm calling this time of prayer and conversion. Because anything that we do to be able to proclaim the good news of the gospel has to start in prayer. We have to embrace and be transformed by Christ's love like Zacchaeus, who is then filled with grace and an understanding and a courage to proclaim God's good news. And so what does that mean for us? We're going to look at building our relationship with Christ. The first year, we kind of set that first layer of getting to know one another, and that continues on every year, every day, every moment in the family of parishes. But in the second year, we're going to highlight and spotlight opportunities for us to get to know Christ so that we can experience his love together and individually and experience that conversion that empowers us. So we're going to create spiritual encounters. We're going to highlight the ones that we have, and we're going to add more opportunities because our hearts and our lives must have Christ at the center. If not, we're going to wear down because the world doesn't want to hear about Jesus. The world doesn't want to see his light, but we're called to be the bearers of that light. During this year, we're going to be looking at opening our hearts and listening to God. We always often have our lists for God to do for us. You know, listen, Lord, your servant is speaking, is the mistranslation of Isaiah. Speak, Lord, your servant is listening. We need to, if we're going to be faithful disciples, Jesus is the one that commissions and beckons us out. And it's hard for us to do, to quiet our lives, to open up our hearts, and to be able to truly listen to where the Lord is calling all of us and our family parishes moving forward. We're going to spotlight and highlight opportunities of various devotions, missions, prayer groups, to help us develop a great sense of personal prayer, prayer as a community, which then always, of course, leads to conversion. So as we continue in our Mass, we reflect on this beautiful story of Zacchaeus and Jesus. Zacchaeus, who does what he can to see Jesus, and Jesus, recognizing Zacchaeus' desire for a life changed, a life transformed, spends time with him, accepts him for who he is, and brings him grace, love, light, and peace. Let us pray for that grace that we too can be like Zacchaeus, always seeking Jesus out, but then also, of course, being like Christ, offering love, mercy, and hope to those who are lost, to those who are forgotten, to those without hope.